Welcome, and it's great to see everyone here today. I am very honored to have the pleasure of introducing the West Virginia Attorney General, Patrick Morrisey, who was elected Attorney General in West Virginia in 2012. Since becoming our Attorney General, he has been fighting for fraud, waste, and abuse, and against corruption, as he's made all of those initiatives a top priority in his office. He has also instituted a new policy of hiring outside counsel, which has dramatically increased transparency and saved our state more than $4 million. His office has returned approximately $18 million in monies to the state and has brought in many more millions to state agency clients and consumers in West Virginia. He is known for protecting the Second Amendment, defending state jobs, and our valuable energy resources. As you know, he is an adamant protector of the coal industry and takes on the Obama administration through lawsuits and constant diligence in protecting the industry that is suffering so bad in West Virginia at this time. He also has strengthened the Office of Consumer Protection Division in our state through vigorous enforcement laws and proactively educating our citizens who sometimes become victims of scams or identity theft. And representing the retail industry, we're constantly watching and protecting the consumers that shop in our stores as best we can against identity theft. So we're always glad to work with his office proactively to address these type of issues. Without further ado, here's Patrick Morrisey, Attorney General of West Virginia.
Well, thank you very much, Bridget, and thanks to all of the individuals who helped organize today's event. It's always a pleasure to come back to my home in the Eastern Panhandle and talk about different ways we could put more West Virginians back to work. Now, when we have a conference about putting West Virginians back to work, I can imagine that 4 or 5 years ago, no one would have ever wanted to invite the Office of Attorney General to the meeting, right? In fact, when I took office, a number of people used to ask me questions when I talk about protecting West Virginia jobs and advancing economic growth. They would literally say, what does the West Virginia Attorney General's office have to do with jobs? Really? Well, I think we've answered that question pretty clearly over the last 4 years. And what I'd like to do today is just give you a little bit of a sense as to how we have fundamentally transformed this office so that we can protect jobs, advance economic growth, and protect our citizens. Now, probably the single most important thing, and many of you know about these initiatives we've been working on, has been our effort to take on federal overreach. Illegal federal regulations have strangled our state over the last few decades, and they've really been on the uptick in recent years with the Obama administration. So when I got elected, I made that one of my top areas of focus. That meant taking on the president's illegal Clean Power Plan, which ultimately cost our state thousands upon thousands of jobs. It meant taking on the Waters United States rule, which has had a very negative effect on farmers, on contractors, on those in the energy industry, retail establishments. In both of those situations, we started getting very involved very early in the process. We would see the regulation come out, we would draft comments, and then ultimately we would file a lawsuit against the federal agency. Now, there were some who said, well, wait a minute, the state of West Virginia has never been out in front filing lawsuits against federal agencies before. Is this a good use of taxpayer money? Well, several years later, I think we've answered that question loud and clear. Our office took the lead to get an unprecedented stay of the president's power plan, saving thousands and thousands of West Virginia jobs. Our office also took a leading role in taking on that Waters United States rule, because we had heard about the Alt family. We had heard about all the people that were worried that the federal government was trying to dramatically expand its jurisdiction into your backyards. Can you imagine treating a backyard ditch like a navigable waterway? When you think of navigable waterways, you think of the Mississippi, you think of the Ohio, you think of the Potomac. you don't think of a backyard ditch or an ephemeral stream. So we worked, along with many other states, a 30-state coalition, to obtain a stay of that regulation. That's going to ensure that West Virginia can continue to develop economically, a critical win for our state. And then we keep going on. Just a few weeks ago, we had a very big win protecting your property rights, so that rather than wait years and years and years to get your Clean Water Act permits or other permits from federal bodies, now your right to go in and challenge happens very quickly. That was a big win before the U.S. Supreme Court. Who led the charge? The West Virginia Attorney General's office did. So these are tangible things that we can do to protect jobs here in the Mountain State. And they matter, because some of these regulations would really have a crippling effect on economic growth here in the Mountain State. Let's take the CPP, for instance. We know that it's cost thousands of jobs in southern West Virginia, north central, and across our state. Beyond that, though, we've had a cataclysmic decline in terms of our severance tax revenue. We've lost a lot. The budget deficit that was recently reported on, there was a $426 million deficit for the last fiscal year. Do you know what one of the principal culprits of that was? There was a dramatic reduction in coal severance tax revenue, and not as high a revenue as expected for oil and natural gas. So when we go in and we litigate in these areas, it not only affects jobs, it affects the revenue for our state. It does something more as well. If you look at the Clean Power Plan, if you look at these other regulations, not only will they cost jobs, they will increase the price of electricity here in the Mountain State. And let's be clear, when you're an energy resource dependent state, you have to make sure you can compete effectively in that area. When you look at the CPP, that would put West Virginia at a strategic advantage. That's why we went in, that's why we sued, and ultimately, that's a big reason why we won. Now, beyond taking on federal overreach, our office has also transformed itself to make substance abuse, fighting substance abuse, a top priority. We know in order to be competitive with all the states that we touch, we need to have a clean workforce, devoid of substance abuse problems. Well, our office has gone from not having any role, and I mean it, any role whatsoever, in fighting substance abuse, with the exception of some scattered lawsuits, to now playing a primary role taking on substance abuse in the Mountain State. And what we're trying to do is attack this problem holistically, from a supply, a demand, and an educational perspective. And our efforts are paying off. Recently, we unveiled our Best Practices Initiative, which has now received the support of many entities around the state, the enforcement boards, the West Virginia Medical Association, the osteopaths, the nurses, and all the related healthcare professionals, and law enforcement. You know what the goal of this initiative is? To dramatically reduce the use of opioids in our state. Through this initiative alone, I think we can drop opioid usage by over 25%. But we need to keep going. Our office is now playing an important role on some of the underlying prosecutions here in the Eastern Panhandle against substance abuse. Through a new partnership that we established with the U.S. Attorney's Office, we now come together, and we've been able to secure 4 convictions against drug dealers who infest our community with heroin and other products. I'd like to see the next legislature give us a little bit more authority to go after this drug problem with a vengeance. So I ask every legislator in this room, give the AG more tools to go after this terrible problem. Because what we're doing with the tools we have, they are working. Our Best Practices Initiative is getting a lot of support. Our enforcement throughout the pharmaceutical supply channel is already causing the decline in opioid pills coming into our state. And our education work is being received very well. We've probably given over 150 educational seminars across the state. And in the upcoming weeks, we're going to be talking about different ways we can get to the high schools and educate some of the athletes that may fall prey to this terrible epidemic. So substance abuse must be an integral part of how we advance job growth here in the Mountain State. But there's more. We all know that West Virginia suffers from a bloated state government. And over the past 3.5 years, I've worked to do my part to make government much more efficient. Not only have we returned over $33 million back voluntarily to the state general fund, but we've instituted new transparent practices in terms of how we bid out for legal work. So now when we need outside counsel to help us on various initiatives, we try to go through a bidding system unless there's an exception. That system alone has not only saved $4.5 million, I think it's aligned the incentives in our state much better than it's ever been in the past. So we can make a lot of progress just through how we run the railroad in state government. Another initiative that I'm very proud of that we made an announcement about yesterday was our efforts to go after disability fraud. A couple years ago, I may remember speaking to you about the problem of disability fraud in the state of West Virginia. Many people may not realize this, but West Virginia has the highest disability rate in the nation. According to 2011 statistics, approximately 9% of the population were on disability insurance. We work, and we knew that there was going to be a lot of fraud associated with that, so we went after it. We partnered up with the Office of Inspector General, with the Social Security Administration, and we formed a new team. And in the first 6 months of this new team, we've saved at least $1.2 million in reduced fraud, waste, and abuse out of the Social Security Administration and through the state of West Virginia. That's real money, real savings, real good government for West Virginia citizens. Over the lifetime of this initiative, I think we can reduce even more waste. I think by the time our disability fraud unit is really fully in place, we could save between $10 and $15 million a year. Now, anyone who's talking about raising taxes here in this room, I want to be clear. There's a lot more waste out there. We're doing it in Social Security in that area. We can do it in Medicaid fraud as well. I know that we do not have adequate referrals going after Medicaid fraud, and that's an area I want my office to focus on even more. But we could use some additional authority to prosecute in that area so we can save money. I think we could save 20 to 25 million more a year going after Medicaid fraud when it's fully operational. And we can save tens of millions more in changing some of the outdated reimbursement methodologies. There's a lot of savings out there to be applied for all the important projects such as building the roads, the infrastructure, the bridges, etc. There's a lot more we can do, and we can do it by making government more efficient. Look at our office. We're spending less in our office by a significant amount, yet we're saving a lot more money for taxpayers. That's the right combination. Lean, efficient government that saves West Virginians money. But we're also working to improve the state's business climate. I know that when I first took office, I made a few promises. Well, one of them was that I was going to end the friends and family plan in the Office of Attorney General. Well, that we have. We don't have lawsuits run amok, at least not coming out of my office. They're all tightly managed. We enforce the law vigorously, yet fairly. And it's critical to make sure that the incentives when you pay lawyers are reasonable. Now, we've been working to change all that, limiting how much outside counsel can get paid and protecting the taxpayers at the same time. We're also proud to work with the legislature who pushed through an enormous number of great reforms in the area of tort reform. Because regardless of what you think about the reputation of being a judicial hellhole, it was something that stuck. And I commend the legislature for all the good work they did in order to swing the pendulum over back to a more reasonable area. So the legislature deserves some real credit there. But we need to do more to improve our business climate. We need fundamental tax reform, and we need to keep reducing waste in government. My hope is that while we've had a good first 3.5 years in office, we can do a lot more over the upcoming 4 years, a second term. And that's why I'm pleased to be here today, and I'm grateful for all the support you've given me. There's a fundamental difference that will be pointed out in this upcoming election between the policies that I'll advance in my second term versus what my opponent will try to advance in his first. We cannot go back to the bad old days of the Attorney General's office anymore. We have to move forward because that could make a significant difference in saving and preserving jobs for many years into the future. So I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here, and I'm also happy to take any questions that you may have.